This is Dimitri Lascaris for The Real News in Silver Springs, Maryland. We're here today at the Convergence on Climate organized by the Labor Network for Sustainability, and I'm here today with Joe Uihlein, who's the president and the co-founder of LNS. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So why don't you start by telling us about how you, as a member of organized labor, became involved in this important initiative towards sustainability?
Yeah, well, I started at a young age working in an aluminum mill in central Pennsylvania and joined the Steelworkers Union. That mill was wiped out by Hurricane Agnes, which devastated central Pennsylvania in 1971. And so then I went to work as a laborer and on flood cleanup at first, and then I found myself working at 3 Mile Island in the construction of that power plant. And every day I went to work, I crossed a picket line of environmental groups who didn't want the power plant to be built. And you know, they had a point. Like, it's right next to the airport, and the cooling towers weren't designed to withstand the impact of a Boeing 707, which was the largest jet at that time. And they had other reasons, and I understood that and sympathized with them. At the same time, it was the best job I ever had. My union, however, had a bumper sticker that said, "Hungry and out of work, eat an environmentalist." And that I didn't like. I had grown up along the banks of the Great Lake Erie at a time when we swam in the lake and we ate the yellow perch, and then they posted all the signs saying you can't swim in a lake, you can't eat the perch. So by 17, I had a developing environmental awareness given that upbringing. So I objected to the bumper sticker, and that didn't go over well. But what that did was, as I pursued my life's work in the trade union movement, I did so with very strong environmental convictions that stem not just from the fact that we have to take care of this precious planet, but that it's in our self-interest as trade unionists to take care of this precious planet. So that's kind of how I got started, at least on the larger environmental questions.
Right. Your comments remind me of something that the head of Greenpeace said not too long ago in advance of the Copenhagen Climate Conference in 2009, that there are no good jobs on a dead planet.
Yeah.
And as powerful and as true as that message obviously is, the conflict that you've talked about is one that is, I think, playing out in many industrialized and non-industrialized economies between the interests of organized labor in a solution to the climate crisis, but their obvious and understandable desire for the maintenance of good jobs. And, you know, in Canada, where I come from, we saw last year the Social Democratic Party, the NDP, holding its conference in Alberta, which is the sort of center of the oil industry in Canada and the tar sands. They had a debate about whether to adopt the LEAP Manifesto, which Naomi Klein and Avi Lewis have championed, and it turned out to be quite acrimonious, and a very senior figure from the labor movement there quite bitterly condemned the proponents of the LEAP Manifesto for the reason that this was potentially going to cause the loss of good-paying jobs in the oil sector, which is quite important to the Canadian economy. In an era when government is not going to help the American workers through the transition to a sustainable, clean energy economy, and in fact doesn't even have any apparent interest in moving us in that direction, whether through policy or funding or otherwise, how do you persuade workers to get on board with this enterprise, and how do you persuade the leaders of organized labor to get on board?
I think there are two different ways there. One approach for working class people, and another for the leadership of the labor movement. And frankly, they're harder. The leadership is a tougher sell.
And why is that?
Well, I think that I know why it is. As a trade union leader, and I served as one for many years, I was elected Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO's Industrial Division. You know, we have a moral and a legal responsibility to represent the interests of people who pay dues to unions today and want their jobs protected. So I totally get why the leaders, you know, they want to protect the jobs of coal miners and fossil fuel workers. These people are paying dues to unions today. The thing is that we also have a moral responsibility to look out for the future of our movement, our labor movement. And that is where the problem is, because climate change is the real job killer. It is the threat to the future of the labor movement. And that's something that we have more work to do to get the leaders of the labor movement to think seriously about. Working people, when you talk about climate change as the real job killer, they tend to get it. You know, I get responses, say, from public employees, both leaders and rank and file who are in AFSCME and AFT, and they say, well, we don't really have skin in the game, so to speak, and so, you know, why should we be active on this? And I say, well, think about this. Your reason for existence as a union is to negotiate good contracts. You can only do that if there are healthy state, local, and federal budgets. Otherwise, you can't negotiate good contracts. Climate change is going to devastate those budgets. It already is, and the projections are that it will devastate them even more. At the last convergence, a year and 9 months ago, the head of the Washington State AFL-CIO talked about how the budget for fighting forest fires in the state of Washington has increased 15-fold in the last decade. So they're already, and that's true for the entire West, Montana. You know, they're all got forest fires. So, and we've seen what happened with Harvey, with Katrina, with Sandy, with Irma. This is going to devastate budgets. So public employees have as much a reason to fight for this as anyone, maybe more so.
So you talk about these very recent extreme weather events.
Yeah.
What's happened in 2017 is
Yeah.
mind-boggling, what we've seen in terms of the wildfires you mentioned. Harvey, 50 inches or so of
Yeah.
rainfall on Houston, a record for the United States.
Yeah.
Irma, the first Category 5 to form out in the open Atlantic east of the Leeward Islands, where the waters tend to be cooler.
Yeah.
Now we have Maria, which has, in Trump's own words, obliterated Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
This is a relatively new initiative. It's your second convergence.
Mm-hmm.
How do you compare the attitude of labor leaders today, particularly in the wake of the extreme weather we've seen recently, towards the Labor Sustainability Network's mission to the way it was when you first embarked on this project?
Well, the minds are far more open today than they were when we embarked, and more than that, unions are now taking action on this issue. When we started LNS, no union was acting on climate change. A few had adopted resolutions. My union, the Steelworkers, was the first union to adopt a resolution on climate change, but nobody was taking action. Then came the Keystone Pipeline, which was a big divisive issue between labor and environmentalists, but it brought some unions out on the anti-pipeline position. NNU, the National Nurses United, the Amalgamated Transit Union, the TWU, then CWA. So that conflict brought about change, which is what happens historically. And so then there was the big march in New York, the first big climate march, and there were 100 local unions that endorsed that march. So this thing is really growing. We had 75 people at the convergence last year, and we've got almost double that here this year.
Well, congratulations on growing the LNS, and we wish you the best of luck in your endeavors. And thank you for joining us today, Joe.
Thanks for having me.
And this is Dimitri Lascaris for The Real News.